LSU landed four-star wide receiver Jelani Watkins last night, pushing them into the top 10 in the On3 industry rankings. And that's just the icing on the cake. The Tigers, they've landed 5 commits in the last 15 days and are red hot as summer is coming to a close. Now, LSU, there's still some key targets on the board, though. So let's bring on Shea Dixon from the Bengal Tigers. Shea, we're going to get into this whole Colin Simmons debate in just a minute. We're still 4 days away from that. But first, let's talk about LSU and if they can close on the top 2 players in the state of Louisiana. And I'm talking 5-star D lineman Dominic McKinley and 4-star DB Wardell Mack. We'll start with Wardell Mack. Always thought this would go LSU's way, but he's currently trending towards Texas on the RPM. Did it hurt that he did not make it into Bayou Splash last weekend?
I don't think it helped, certainly with him not being there. He was the most notable in-state Louisiana recruit that was not at the Bayou Splash, and he ended up visiting Florida the following day, which is a team that's certainly been in the mix as well. I think you would circle Florida, LSU, and Texas as the top teams here, Josh. I don't know if he's still going to shut it down before his senior season. He says he will, or at least he has said that in the past, but it'd be tough to pick. I would lean maybe Texas right now, but I know that, look, it's a long way to signing day. Even if a player announces right now, is it completely over with? There was some of that chatter yesterday, even with a guy like KJ Bolden. So I don't know which way this one is going to go today. Now, could that change in a few weeks? Sure. And will that change by signing day? Maybe even more so. I think Max is a recruitment that will play out all the way till December, even if he does give a verbal commitment to a school earlier than that.
Yeah, it kind of does seem like that. It seems like if he does make a summer decision that this thing's going to go all the way to National Signing Day no matter what. So he's the number 2 ranked player in the state of Louisiana. And right now, currently, as it stands, LSU has landed 8 out of the top 10 in the state after last year missing on 6 out of the top 10. But right now, we're going to turn our attention to the number 1 defensive lineman in the state of Louisiana, 5-star Dominic McKinley. What's the latest intel on LSU's chances and where they stand in his recruitment?
You know, LSU has made a really big push here lately, Josh. They did get him in for the Bayou Splash. That was big because this was a guy who went out of state for 4 official visits in the month of June. And for a 5-star, his recruitment really took off a lot later than a lot of other 5-stars. He picked up most of his offers this spring. So the recruiting process is still a bit fresh to him and his camp. That being said, they have sandwiched a lot into a handful of months here. And I think that LSU is finally able to really dig in here and make their pitch. The Bayou Splash, you would call probably their most successful visit yet with McKinley. And then that puts the pressure on Texas. It puts the pressure on Oklahoma, these other schools that are in the mix that got visits for him and that were riding some confidence coming out of those visits into the rest of the summer. So, yes, you mentioned it. A year ago during that transition period when Brian Kelly and them first got here, 6 of the top 10 guys in the state did leave, Arch Manning, that whole group. Now, in this cycle, we've already seen them, as you noted, lock up 80% of the top 10. But when the number 1 and 2 players remain uncommitted, the storyline continues. You want to be able to close with those guys. And the rankings are far from settled. But I do think the number 1 player in McKinley is a guy that I think LSU is starting to feel a good bit better on than maybe they were a month ago.
All right. So we know that right now where these guys are trending. But let's talk 4 months from now. When it's all said and done, when the dust settles and signing day's over, who do you think is more likely to sign with LSU at this point? Wardell Mack or Dominic McKinley?
Oh, that's a great question. I will go, base it on either. LSU has not lost a lot of Acadiana area kids, and certainly not kids from that Lafayette area. Now, New Iberia, Westgate has seen a couple of guys leave recently, one to Alabama and then Derek Williams last cycle to Texas. But LSU does have a commitment from Demarion Johnson right now out of Westgate, and they're on Jabari Antoine next year, one of the top corners in America, the number 2 corner on 3 right now. So they're getting their footing back there. Not that LSU doesn't have a great firm grip on New Orleans typically, especially with Frank Wilson on staff. I just haven't seen a lot of Lafayette area kids leave the state. So I'll lean McKinley, but just for that reason.
Okay. Well, now let's head over to the state of Texas. It's time to talk about that Duncanville duo. They are going to be making their decision this Thursday. I'm talking 4-star running back Caden Durham and 5-star plus edge Colin Simmons. Let's start with Caden Durham, the number 8 ranked running back in the country. LSU doesn't currently have a running back committed in the 24 class. Is Durham now the top target for LSU?
It's always been this by design, really, for Frank Wilson. It was Durham or bust from the start. And LSU has a good amount of running backs on scholarship. That'll get them through this year. But looking towards the future, even in 2025, the number 1 running back in the country, Harlan Berry, is out of New Orleans. A top 10 running back in the country, James Simon, is out of North Louisiana. So they felt good in the 2024 cycle of saying, hey, let's circle one guy and go after him with everything we've got. That's Caden Durham. I think that effort's going to pay off now. Remember, there was a time where people thought he was an Oklahoma lock. His mom was a sprinter for the Sooners. He had visited Oklahoma a ton to kick off his recruitment. And Oklahoma's recruited Duncanville well over the years, and LSU's not had a foothold at a school like that in East Texas. So for the LSU to be able to get into South Dallas to recruit Duncanville, maybe the most talented program right now in the country in terms of just pure talent and college level players on roster, to be able to make this kind of splash with a guy like Durham, which I do think they do this week by reeling in his verbal commitment, is huge, because LSU, we know what they can get from Louisiana, Josh, but can you routinely dip into Houston, to Dallas, and to some of these bordering states and get guys at a high level? Guys like Durham, a top 100 prospect, fit that, they really fit that bill. So I do think this is a really, really big week for LSU when it comes to recruiting in Texas, because you have the chance to knock down a couple of dominoes, but I said it from the start. They need to come away with at least one of these Duncanville kids to consider all that effort to be a success. I think they're going to get that with at least Durham.
All right, so that takes us to the number 1 edge in the country, Colin Simmons, teammates with Caden Durham, and this is a tight one on the recruiting prediction machine. What has LSU done to put themselves in Simmons' final group right now?
I think what they've done is just been there from the start. And when you look at what Simmons has, his offer list, he's got 40 plus offers. He's taken visits to schools all over the country. He made a handful of official visits in the month of June, including to Texas, the other team that's obviously being talked about right now as LSU's main competition. But I went back and looked over the past year. LSU has actually had more visits from Simmons than Texas has, a couple of more. And in total, during his recruitment, they've had the exact same number of visits. So for him to lock in on an out-of-state team like LSU, I think that's shown the interest is sincere from the start. And then just look at his actions. I mean, even without taking an official visit, which he has set for November to LSU, they're right here in the top 2. And Texas did get one of those June official visits that he took. You also look back at the Colorado spring game. Deion Sanders has this long list of guys who are coming in. Colin Simmons was one of the big names on the list. He doesn't go to it. He ends up backing out, and he shows up as a surprise visitor at LSU. And then during that 7-day open period, I guess it was a quiet period, right, Josh? In between July's dead period and August's dead period, recruits had 7 days they could go to a college campus. Colin Simmons spent 4 of those days at LSU, and he didn't visit anywhere else that we know of. So his actions, I think, point towards him having very real interest in LSU. Now that he's set a date coming off of that LSU visit at the Bayou Splash, I think that's what has a lot of LSU people saying, man, it looks like LSU's done enough work here to potentially pull this off.
It sure feels that way. And over the weekend, or I should say on Friday, you and your cohort, Billy Embody of the Bengal Tiger, put in RPM picks for Colin Simmons to LSU. So coming out of that big Bayou Splash weekend, what was it that gave you guys confidence to call it for LSU on Thursday when Colin Simmons makes his decision?
I don't know. Don't put me on the spot there with call it. I think this is one that continues to play out every day. As we record, as we're talking right now, Josh, both schools could feel one way. By the time, a Texas fan or LSU fan is listening to this in a day, 2 days, whenever it might be, things could have completely changed. And that's how
Absolutely.
It is with a 5-star number 1 edge prospect. That's just the reality of 2 teams battling. And you see it in the RPM picks. Jerry and the guys at Texas still have it on Texas on a lower percentage, just above 50%. And as you noted, Billy and myself are on LSU, just above 50%. So I think it kind of sums up where each school kind of feels like they stand is they feel like they've got a slight edge, but they know there's real competition out there. I would just point back to why I made the pick. Him spending those 4 days at LSU and then turning around and saying, I'm announcing my decision at the same time
Right.
as a teammate who a lot of people feel very good about ending up at LSU, doesn't even have Texas in his final grouping. No, they're not a package deal, but I don't think it hurts that they're doing it on the same day. So I would point to that as a big reason why. You come off of a big visit weekend like that and immediately set a commitment date. More often than not, it proves good news for the team that just hosted you. But this, again, is a wild recruitment. We'll see.
Yeah, and it just feels right. I know Miami, it's a top 3 with Miami involved as well, but I think they're just merely a hat on the table for this decision. For the last really 2 years, I think this has been shaping up to be an LSU versus Texas battle, and now that we're 4 days away from that, it surely feels that way. All right, so this week we're going to find out about Colin Simmons. We're going to find out about Caden Durham. The Tigers currently have 23 commitments as it stands right now. What are LSU's remaining needs, if any, after this week?
I think it's more specific to guys. They've done a very good job of addressing needs, but the ones we've talked about, the 2 big guys in state right now, or at least the number 1 and 2 guys in McKinley and Mack. They've also offered Gabriel Relaford out of Evangel in Louisiana, who's committed to Texas A&M as a defensive lineman. So interior defensive lineman, I think, is a need, but those 3 guys, obviously McKinley fits that bill as an interior defensive lineman, a 5-star. And then it's the guys that they've just been on a long time, whether that's guys in Texas like Colin Simmons and Caden Durham, or whether you branch out to guys like Kobe Black at corner or Terry Bussey as an athlete. These are really high-level prospects who remain uncommitted, who have LSU in their league group, toss in a guy like Blake Ivy on the offensive line. And it's more specific to, I think now, Josh, the guys they put in so much time on, can they close them? So 23 commitments, a top 10 class. That's more than a great start. That's a very good job of addressing needs, locking up Louisiana in a big way, and hitting on some big out-of-state targets. But to take it from 10 to a top 5 class means knocking down some big dominoes like the guys we've talked about.
Yeah, so far, so good for LSU. And after this week, it looks like they're just going to go big game hunting. So Shea Dixon, I'm sure it's going to be a hectic week back and forth with Colin Simmons, Caden Durham commitments coming up. Thank you for dropping by the Inside Scoop today. Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me. And remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.